It's Tuesday, April 14th, House Education. We are now going to spend some time with our legislative council going through the Ways and Means Amendment to H 955. The committee watched this presentation in front of House Appropriations so that they would be better, to have the background they need so we can make this a relatively efficient process. And I just say that to those who are watching, if you think we're rushing, this is actually a little bit of a rerun for us.
Not for everyone.
I know.
So only some of us.
Again, like we did with John, I'm going to be reading as we go along. If you have a question, just shout it out. Don't wait for me to call on you. And I think we will work in the section by section document that is under Kirby's name on our website. If nobody has any objection to that, that's what we'll do. Great. Beth, it's all yours.
Thank you, Beth St. James, excuse me, Office of Legislative Counsel. And I should note that this, I believe the section by section summary has all sections in it.
Okay.
We need to remove the top there. There's some language in there. It just wasn't amended between all of the various staff people that had worked in this document. Do you want me to share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay.
You may not have co-hosting control yet.
I do. Okay. So if you saw me in Ways and Means, you already know that there's 8 instances of amendment in the Ways and Means amendment. The first 7 instances, actually the first 6 instances are amending your work. The 7th instance is adding a new section within your work. And then the 8th instance of the amendment is all the rest of the sections that Ways and Means is adding for the first time. So the first instance of amendment is to section 4 of your bill, making the extra money for the CISA Startup Grant Program. Remember, you took it from a $10,000 grant to a $15,000 grant. So you needed to come up with an extra $5,000 per CISA for a total of $30,000. And all this amendment does is make it clear that the source of this money is the Act 73 education transformation money. It was appropriated to AOE and amended in section C103 of the budget. So they didn't make any changes to the amount of money or what the money could be used for. It's just the source of the funds. And you'll see that for every appropriation that you have. The second instance of amendment to section 13, which is our big study committee section, is requiring that when facilitators form study committees, in addition to everything else you've asked facilitators to take into account, Ways and Means is asking them to also take into consideration grant list values, accounting for the homestead exemption and current education spending.
I'm just going to interrupt for a second, just to tell everybody the repeated language about the money and it coming from money appropriated. You want to see where that is? It's in C103 of the budget.
Also, the third instance of amendment is also to section 13, our big study committee section. And it requires facilitators to monitor the work of the General Assembly related to education transformation and share the most up-to-date fiscal modeling with study committees. So if it's out there, the facilitators need to make sure that study committees are aware of it. The fourth instance of amendment are all of the changes to your appropriations for the various different grants that you have established to get the money where it needs to go for CISA executive directors, for facilitator hiring, for study committee reimbursement grants. What Ways and Means did is they kept the amount of money the same that you appropriated. They just made that same change to make it clear that the money is coming out of that Act 73 education transformation appropriation as amended by the budget this year. The one substantive change they did make was to be the facilitator appropriation. They did not change the amount of money, but the language that traveled out of your committee had the money going directly to the Vermont Learning Collaborative. And so we've changed that. The money is already appropriated to AOE. We require AOE then within 45 days of the passage of this act to give that money to the Vermont Learning Collaborative. Anything else you want me to go over on the appropriations? No. Section 18 is the fifth instance of amendment or changes to section 18. Ways and Means repealed what you did and added their own section 18. Section 18 is amending section 70 of Act 73, which is the effective date section. This is where all the contingencies live. So you'll see subsection D was an amendment to section 48, the effective date of section 48 in Act 73, changing the effective date from 7/1/29 to 7/1/30. Subsection F is the foundation formula and other tax changes effective dates. I can't remember off the top of my head. Let's see what as introduced. Okay. So you all moved the date out from July 1, 2028 to 2030, and Ways and Means kept that for the foundation formula. They kept the school districts have an opportunity to study the advisability, and the clerk has certified the votes. I believe that was, let's see. Yep, there's some slight word changing, but the concept is the same. They've kept the what's current law 45A report. And they did,
You know, off the top of your head, 45A report, is that the full AIR study, is that the pre-K study?
that's the AAR study. The concept of having some sort of JFO analysis in subdivision C for the contingency is the same, but Ways and Means changed what that analysis is. So JFO has provided the General Assembly with an analysis using fiscal year 27 data that compares total appropriated state funds received by each school district under the current funding formula to what school districts would have gotten under the Act 73 foundation formula had it been in effect. And then subdivision D, legislation has been enacted to address several components of the foundation formula. I don't think they made any changes to that. They did. They took out that and anything else language. You had any other aspect of the foundation formula General Assembly deems prudent to address, and Ways and Means removed that one. It is implicit in your work.
Right.
Same change to the contingency for the two pieces related to tuition that have their own contingent effective dates. Same slight word changes that Ways and Means made to the districts have the opportunity to study, and then the votes have been certified contingency. So overall, kept the contingency changes very much the same as what you passed out. The sixth instance of amendment is to your section 21, which was the JFO pre-K report. So they struck your section 21 and they replaced it entirely with their own. It kept the legislative intent for what pre-K funding will support and adds the following. It requires AOE, DCF, and Building Bright Futures to establish a system to jointly monitor pre-K. It requires Building Bright Futures in consultation with the AOE and DCF to report annually to the General Assembly. It requires Building Bright Futures to submit a report to the General Assembly on and before December 1st, 2026, with information specifically on BBF's work under their federal preschool development grant and the data collection they're doing pursuant to that. What are their initial findings? Have they identified any outstanding gaps in data? And what are their do they have any legislative recommendations related to that work? JFO kept the concept, JFO, I did this in approach too. Ways and Means kept the concept of JFO hiring a contractor to study pre-K. Ways and Means provided some more specificity around what that report is supposed to be. And I'll just let the language speak for itself unless you have specific questions.
I think we had 50K in it. It's up to 75.
Yes, you had 50. We bumped that up to 75, and this is not included in the education transformation appropriation. My understanding is there is a bottom line with some money in it, and this would come out of that money eventually, but that is a question more for JFO than me.
I don't know whether this is a question for you, probably isn't, but I'm just curious as why Building Bright Futures is the entity that they've added together.
I don't know if you have an answer to that.
That's why I said I don't think you probably would, but I will follow up on it. I just wanted to note
I
it.
think you got an answer.
Well, I don't know if I have the answer, but my understanding is that Building Bright Futures has this large federal grant right now, this preschool development grant. And so there was a desire to capitalize on the work that's already happening related to pre-K and have that information come back to you in a formal fashion. That is my understanding.
Thanks.
So those are all the changes that Ways and Means made to the language that you all passed out and the bill is introduced. Everything else is brand new language that Ways and Means has added. So the 7th instance of amendment is adding a brand new statute, but we're adding it nestled in among your work. So it's not going to be part of the 8th instance of amendment. It's section 21A. And it is an amendment to section 829, which is the pre-kindergarten statute. By requiring school districts to report annually to AOE with the number of hours of pre-K education received by each pre-K child for whom it has either provided pre-K education or on whose half it is paid tuition pursuant to that particular section, which is the Act 166 funds. And then it adds Building Bright Futures to the folks who are required to establish a monitoring system. AOE and DCF are currently charged with this under current law, and adding Building Bright Futures. And now we're in the 8th instance of amendment, which is just going to be sections 22 through 86, all added by Ways and Means. Section 22 requires, is an amendment to your weighting statute. Section 4010 subsection C that requires school districts to require each resident student pre-K through 12 who's on whose behalf the district pays tuition to complete a form developed by AOE for the info needed for AOE to compute the weighting categories for tuition students. And it requires those forms to be included with any residency verification forms and requests for public tuition funding forms required by a school.
Is there that's effective July 1st, 2026 meeting that's starting and they have to start this work?
Yes. This seems to be a data gap.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
I feel like we had a conversation the other day talking about private pre-kindergarten education providers. Maybe it had to do with us going over to New Hampshire, but I see that it's in here now. Does it need to still be in here? Or does that change what we were saying before? Because I thought,
It's that for pre-K in particular, that's not in here.
Okay.
When this is referring to tuition, this is referring really to K to 12. education.
And I think that pre-K wasn't it specific to an area?
Oh, yes.
Okay, it was just, okay.
It was just that one narrow area
Yeah.
of the Northeast Kingdom. Yeah.
Okay.
This language does want these forms for pre-K students.
Okay.
You don't know how you're gonna fund pre-K under the foundation model.
Right there.
And if it involves weights, you're gonna need that data.
Yeah.
So let's just start collecting it now with everyone else. Section 23 is largely legislative intent related to special education funding. Making it clear that it is your intent that any changes you're making to the state education finance system would not make Vermont non-compliant with MOE, with maintenance of effort, with the federal special education funding requirements for how much money states, at a state level and on a local level, districts are supposed to be spending and using for special education services on a year-over-year basis. Generally speaking, that's called maintenance of effort requirement. And so we want to make sure that the funding system doesn't put districts in a precarious place where they would somehow be in violation of federal law and then jeopardize special education. There's more to this section, but in the interest of time, I think maybe this is not where we spend all of our time, but I'm happy to answer questions about it. It's largely all legislative intent language.
Right, and basically it says we're gonna follow the law.
Yeah. That is one way to summarize it, yeah. It does require a couple things like AOE to issue guidance to ensure school districts implement Act 73 in a manner that is consistent with federal special ed requirements. But generally speaking, the bulk of it is just, we're gonna follow the law.
Once we figured out how, we're gonna follow the law, but we haven't figured out how to fund it.
Yep, it's a vague, or I shouldn't say vague, it's a broad, any changes.
I'm saying it only because I want to make sure that everyone understands, we don't have the decisions made on that.
Section 24 is an amendment to section 828, which is the statute which tells school districts who they are allowed to pay tuition to. Another way to think about that is what educational programs are eligible to receive public tuition. This amendment prohibits schools that are eligible to receive tuition from requiring tuition or fee of any kind from a student attending the school on public tuition above the amount of money that student would bring with them from the school district. This language would take effect with the foundation formula, and under the foundation formula, tuition is the base plus weights for each student. So you can't require tuition or fees from a student who's attending on public tuition above what they are bringing with them from the school district.
Good.
Yeah,
I didn't want to interrupt, but this refers back to 823.
Mhm.
And under 823, a school district can vote, an electorate can vote.
This is referring to 823 as amended for the foundation formula,
Okay,
which removes all of that.
so there is no ability for an electorate to choose to pay
Not under the foundation.
additional.
Under Act 73, there are provisions that have their own contingencies that would allow a receiving school to require up to 5% of the base for high school students. And they would have to charge anyone sending them the same fee, and anyone sending them kids the same fee. They couldn't elect to charge, one district more or less than the other. But no, there's no longer the ability under the foundation formula to set tuition or to vote to spend more than base and weights and whatever kiddo is bringing with them.
Josh has a question.
Just want to clarify. So does it mean that, so there's quite a few districts that charge incoming students higher tuition than their cost per pupil spending? So does that goes away?
Under the foundation formula and Act 73, yes.
Do we know, did anyone do any work to see how that impacts certain school districts that may, use that to cover, because some school districts are running very lean and some of that helps with transportation for those kids to get there, or get kids to and from. Has any of that been looked into?
I think
Do
that's
we
a
know?
question. I think that's a question for JFO as far as what modeling has been done related to tuition and the foundation formula.
Okay.
We'll say
Thank you.
transportation is an outstanding policy choice for you all to make.
As usual. Thank you.
Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, and just a quick question for clarity. In 24A, right, that just pretty much says, you get what you get and that's that. It's all going to take, and this goes into effect with the foundation formula. So why does it say effective July 1st, 2026?
Section here, let's look at section 24A, what it actually says. Twenty-four A, prohibition on charging fees beyond tuition, legislative intent. This is just an intent section.
Yep.
Say that it is your intent that the section right above this section, section 24, is not effective until the foundation formula is effective.
Right.
And this language itself is going to go into effect on July 1, 2026.
Okay.
But it is just intent language. I just want to go back to section 24. There's also another piece here. It also prohibits public receiving schools from requiring tuition or fees of any kind for any of their students, both tuition and resident students. So if you can't charge, I shouldn't say charge, if you can't require a fee or tuition from a student you are receiving on a tuition basis, you also can't charge it to your district residents. Section 25 amends section 707 in Title 16.
Go ahead.
On that section, I know that I heard there was quite a bit of discussion in appropriations
Yes.
now about that. But I'm not sure I heard the end of that conversation. Was there a resolution of when we're talking about the per pupil spending sort of tuition amount versus a dark room fee to take art or a to play for the buff for a hockey team? Like I heard them going there and I'm not sure if it got resolved or not, so.
I think those would all be considered fees. And I think the discussion from my perspective, sitting in the witness seat, just kind of ping-ponging,
Yeah.
watching it,
Yeah.
was that the discussion was around what is requiring.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you to go back. I don't want to mischaracterize any of that conversation. I think what Chair Kornheiser was trying to differentiate between is it's one thing to say, okay, kids, if you want to go to France, we're going to have a car wash and we're going to sell cookies or whatever. And if we collectively don't raise enough money for the school, no one goes. Versus it's $4,500 to go and you can participate in fundraising if you want. But if you don't choose to fundraise, then you have to pay the $4,500. It's either everyone goes because you've raised the money or no one goes if there's money required on top of your school district budget. And then there was some discussion about the philosophy of if it is part of your educational program, it should be part of your budget. And that was very much made clear to be a philosophy, right? Like a policy position. And so I don't know that they settled anything, but there was also not necessarily anything left on the table. Like there was clarity on what this was trying to do. Maybe not agreement on whether it was good or bad. But I would encourage you, I don't want to mischaracterize anything, so I would encourage you to watch it.
But for any further legal clarification, I mean,
You can ask me.
right, I guess philosophically, yes, of course. The real world that we live in, it's different. So I wonder, like that could have a pretty big impact on things and adjacent, not your poor academics, but school related. And so I don't know if my questions are legal and ledge counsel or testimony in the field, but
I haven't heard a question yet.
I guess in the scenario of, I mean, that, I don't necessarily disagree philosophically, but if we are putting in place a policy that says the school's gonna do this thing, we're gonna try to fundraise, and if we don't fundraise enough to cover everyone, we don't do it. I can almost guarantee we are talking about hundreds of things happening in, around schools today that would no longer be, you know, trips, activities, groups, clubs, conferences, retreats, like, I want to live in the philosophical ideal world, don't get me wrong, 1000%. We don't, and so I just want us to be pretty clear about what we're doing, so that in 3 years, when like everybody in Vermont says, we haven't gone on a field trip and we'll never go on a field trip again anywhere. We know why. And I don't just mean to France, I mean like the Audubon Center, but yeah.
Was,
Go ahead.
well, I mean, does anyone know, was there discussion in ways and means about sort of narrowing that, the idea of tuition or fees, you know, to sort of attend like your core academic day,
It's like your,
like
pupils.
like lopping off like exactly what you're talking about, you know, like extracurriculars, team sports, like, you know, all the things that students are excited about, but are sort of outside of your, you know, your standard learning day.
I would certainly hope that schools aren't pay to play when it comes to extracurriculars like sports.
They are when it comes to field trip. I mean, would
I
it
was
be
just
fees
gonna
or
say,
commitment
it-
fees or?
Jeff mentioned something that made me think of this, and that is that it can be, if it's academic or it's related to your academics, it should be in your budget.
As that is a policy position.
That's right. So what I guess I'm trying to say is related to what your point was, Rep. Brady. If now we want to make sure that all children have access to that trip to Europe that they're taking, we gotta figure out how to pay for it out of the budget. Or if we can't fundraise for it. So there's that aspect of it too. Chris.
So I'm just going to, this is a process point. So this was a ways and means thing, to defend on the floor as well with those questions. I suspect this would probably be subject to more interpretation and adjustment when the bill moves to the Senate. That's of any consolation or not to anybody. Like, yeah, I just want to put that out there.
Section 25 is an amendment to section 707, which is the study committee budget statute in chapter 11. Raise and Means raised the amount of study committee budgets that requires a vote of the electorate from 50,000 to 500,000. And my understanding is they did that largely based on the cost of elections. It may actually cost more than $50,000 to hold a special election to get you the voter approval.
I appreciate that. The cost of election was not part of the calculation when we did this, so I appreciate that.
I can't remember if we even raised it above what it was in the previous chat, like before we redid it, so. Section 26, requires the State Board of Education to update the EQS rule series to establish criteria for identifying schools as small by necessity or sparse by necessity. They have to adopt those rules on or before March 31st, 2027, unless LCAR gives them an extension. And the rules need to be consistent with the recommendations that you all got this year. That's that December 17th, 2025 memo that I'm referencing.
Yes, and again, I would express some appreciation for Ways and Means following up on this. It was on our list of things that we follow up on. So just to get the rulemaking going.
Section 27 requires the state board to adopt, that should be AOE, to adopt updates to the DQS rule series to establish criteria for intra-district budgeting on or before March 31st, 2027, unless given an extension by LCAR, and those rules shall require ensure resources are allocated across schools within each district in a way that provides substantially equal educational opportunities and enables students to achieve or exceed education quality standards. So they're trying to get at the Burlington way of doing things, right? Intra-district budgeting. Although what you get back from the Agency of Education may look nothing like what Burlington is doing, but I think it was the Burlington concept that spurred the thought of, well, should we provide some guidance on how to allocate your lump sum payment to make sure everyone's needs are met within the district. Section 27A amends Section 7 from Act 183, which was the yield bill from 2024. Section 7 required AOE to update the district quality standards to include recommended reserve fund account standards. That hasn't happened yet. And so Section 27A is essentially reiterating that that does need to happen and requiring AOE to do so in collaboration with VASBO, the superintendents, and the School Boards Association.
This is guidance on like when a district has surplus dollars at the end and creates a reserve fund, like maybe putting limits on that or whatever. Okay.
Correct. 27B is a report back to you all on school transportation. In the interest of time, I'm just going to say that it requires AOE to give you a report on or before December 1st of this year with a bunch of information related to transportation that I'll let speak for itself, and then recommendations. So there's kind of two parts. We're going to get a bunch of info from AOE, and then we're asking them to make recommendations on specific things, all related to transportation. Section 27C requires AOE
I'm going to
to.
interrupt for just a second. So just everybody's got various time commitments here. John, for example, has to be out of here at 4:45. I read this until 4:15. Never mind. Keep talking.
I'm love to leave now.
Well, I know that you do have to be out of here then. And I did do a roundtable before you came to say, does anybody have follow-up questions for John? I didn't get anybody raise their hand. So is everybody okay if we allow John to do other things? Great, and we have you tomorrow anyway, for an hour. Thank you.
So that's transportation. Section 27C requires AOE to develop that weighting form for tuition students. 27D requires the state board to adopt rules to update the length of school day rules, to establish criteria for the length of a school day for each grade pre-K through 12, consistent with the definition of school that's going to come in a later section. Section 28, I don't know if you heard my rant about this.
You did. We're gonna have to repeal.
Yes, you're gonna repeal it and put
Yep.
law back in.
I love that you all understood that. This is going to happen constantly over the next few years. Okay. Section 29 is just reenacting section 4019 that was created in Act 73. The changes were, instead of the State Board of Education making the determination of who's small and who's sparse, it's AOE. And we also added some clarifying language to make it clear that the grants only apply to public schools. So occasionally we put in the word public and occasionally we put in the term operated by a school district.
Do you know why that change was made from state board to AOE?
AOE makes all of the weighting determination, calculates all of the weights and everything. And they have the staff. So I think it was just a part of that process. They have to make those determinations using the state board's rules. And then section 29A is the last section that I'm responsible for in the Ways and Means Amendment. And that is amending your master definition section in Title VI 16, section 11, to add definitions for average class size, class content area, full-time equivalent, school day, student, and teacher of record. Do you want to look at those definitions?
Was that?
I did.
Okay, good.
Can one of the, I don't know if it would fit in here, but, there was a lot of talk on our school boards about what the definition of terminal course was, since that comes up so much. Is that something that could be defined at some point still in this?
I would caution us from, I think they need to ask that question at this point of AOE.
They being the school board.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, we don't want to amend the amendment.
Right. It just came up so many times.
Yeah.
Because we keep saying that there's an exception for terminal courses.
More questions? Great.
There will be eventually.
So I think our plan will be to return here after the floor tomorrow, which hopefully will not take too long. But with the salt bill held over, I'm not sure. But basically 3:00, we will have Beth, John, and JFO available for any further questions. Then we'll do a straw poll on the Ways and Means Committee amendment, and then our work will be complete
Paused.
until for on Thursday with Bill. Although I don't know if appropriations was amended. TBD on that. All right, so with that, we will adjourn the committee for the day. And we will be back here tomorrow. Let's take a look at the agenda. What we got going on? If anybody's got questions or whatever overnight and all that, feel free to reach out to me. And tomorrow we are back at 9:15, getting an update on community schools. All right, thank you,
Awesome.
everybody.